Hello, and welcome to Culture Conversations, the podcast where we explore the people side of work. I'm your host, Megan Robinson. For years, I've found myself deep in discussions about workplace engagement with industry experts. Now I get to share this wisdom with all leaders, new and experienced, on their journeys to build cultures that maximize potential. We spend so much of our lives at work. Let's make it a place where our teams can grow and succeed. Welcome back to Culture Conversations. I'm Megan Robinson, your host from eLeader Experience, and we have such an exciting conversation for you today. I've got Bay Ryley, a DE&I expert, incredible training company, and we're going to dive deep into a really challenging topic, a trending topic, and something that I know you're going to get some incredible wisdom and expertise from. So let me just introduce Bailey really quickly. She is an employment and human rights lawyer and president of Ryley Learning, a digital workplace learning company with a focus on anti-sexual harassment and anti-racism training for DE&I. Bae, that is a lot of responsibility and incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and glad we've continued our connection and are now sharing our conversations with other people.
I love that too. I get the privilege of having these wonderful conversations and hearing what's going on in the market and hearing different experts talk about what they're passionate about. And DE&I is one that I frankly don't always claim expertise there, but it is such an important topic conversation. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue, and it is continuing to go through major transformation. I would say it feels like every month pretty much. But so our conversation today really want to dive into that kind of DE&I, so what, now what, what's going on, and how have we really evolved? So I'll go ahead and kick it off to you just to ask, what are the trends in DE&I right now?
Well, you're right. There are shifts all the time. And to go a little further back, I know we want to focus on the now, but I've been practicing human rights law for about 20 years now, and I never imagined that that was sort of a fringe thing, that people would have training or care about harassment or racism in the workplace. So this was a fringe thing, and now it leads the business news every day. So that is a huge shift. One of the major shifts was May 2020, 3 years ago, with the death of George Floyd. That created a rise in we're going to talk about stakeholders, which are actually people, but different groups of people who raise their voices. And this has now meant huge changes for how, companies who are for customers, for employees, for the public. This is a huge deal, top business news. We also had the Me Too movement that was around 2016. That also brought in changes with prioritizing what we now call DEI, which is really, making part of your strategy has to be being concerned about harassment, discrimination, and equality in your workplace.
So now your strategy has to have concern for it. What exactly do people have expectations around a DE&I strategy, and where should organizations build a strategy?
I think in terms of what are the expectations now, so just I didn't quite finish off with where are we at now. And one thing we see right now is there seasonal. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about retail holiday cycles, and I don't make it sound like that, but this is Pride Month. So many companies are very focused on LGBTQ plus for customers, for employees. There's resource groups organizing events. It's, when I look on LinkedIn, many people's logo for their business is rainbow. So there is now whatever the month is, and I don't mean to make it sound like a trend, because number one, it shouldn't be a trend and just you're doing it for marketing purposes, but of course we do see that. um I'd like to go back just to your question, that I've now kind of, sorry, I reversed our order here, so bring me
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, so we know DE&I has been on the rise in popularity. 2016, 2020, we've had some major steps along the way that have continued to push this into the forefront. But now we're having a flavor of the month. We're having a lot of politicalized climate around DE&I. What are some of the trends that you're noticing that organizations are building into their strategies or need to be addressing now?
So the strategy is the key word. It has to be part of strategy and not just, hey, what month is it now? Let's look on the calendar. So I think like a more powerful program is one that integrates. So I'm in the training world. So training should be part of your strategy. Um, Hiring, retention, what are you doing there to diversify the people, the pool you're taking people from? Are you promoting the right people? I think that the reasons have shifted from kind of, well, we want to look good, to, oh, actually, DEI is something that drives revenue. And again, not to make it this is about people at the end of the day, but we're realizing that to get the most out of people, they need to feel safe, they need to feel heard and respected. And that means, for us, we do training on anti-sexual harassment, which includes sexual orientation, gender identity. We have anti-racism, unconscious bias training. So that's, do people feel understood, and is there empathy between people? And that is, now a key performance indicator for leaders. So again, that move out of the fringe means that it's more, there's an integration at every sort of step of the business. Um, the other thing is just when you mentioned politicization. So this is really fascinating, actually, because what we've seen is, this has been going since you know, the the Stopes or Scopes trial about evolution, right? It becomes what's going on in schools, who's being, brainwashed one way or the other. We're now seeing this with what we would call pretty I don't want to say run of the mill, but like basic human equality discussions in schools and in workplaces. And as we know, there's some politicians, one of whom's going to be running for president, and other states that are literally banning what we would see as very, nothing crazy. Well, nothing that isn't already in law. And what I mean by that is, it's already, you companies have to do what they need to do, whatever the political moment is right now. So the Civil Rights Act sets out that everyone has a right to be free from harassment, discrimination on the basis of sex and race and all kinds of grounds. And so a company needs to protect, they, first of all, as we talked about, you care about your people, you want them to feel safe and welcome. But frankly, you also have, I'm a lawyer, so I'm thinking, what is your risk management here? What's your litigation? You could be sued for this. And so the company needs to protect itself by training people and letting them know their rights and what people should and shouldn't do in the workplace. So no matter what people think of, when you read, I won't belabor it, but it's really interesting to read the anti-woke or don't say gay and that legislation, because it is, I would say our courses would have components that could be banned. And yet in the winter, we were in Florida winning an award at a big conference with companies from around the world run by a Florida company. and everyone was talking about DEI as, a key corporate imperative.
Congratulations on the award. It's a really big deal. And I was just talking about it with you beforehand, and kind of ironic where you are in places that maybe don't support the type of work that you do or don't actively look to encourage it. And yet you're there getting accolades for it, which is kind of I'm going to say the push pull and part of the challenge of the climate, because it feels like we have such an expectations for organizations to do everything right, to uphold some really high standards. And I'm going to say that that comes through in employees expectations for their employers are incredibly high. They demand respect, they demand to have this equality, they are looking for these snippets of how their culture is really embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the
Yeah,
same time, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that key word that you've just said is expectations. So, and whose expectations? As you say, employees are almost customers now, in the sense that if you want to be a successful organization, you have to, if not please, at least not piss off. And when I started working, no one would have ever complained about, you really need to do this or that, or I'm leaving, or I'm not going to take the job. But now that happens, or people will turn to social media and express their disdain for something the company's done. And often it's in these spheres. So the expectations of employees is really important, and the job market's still tight. Um, and then you have customers too, customers as customers saying, I went in, you see it on social feeds, I went into the store and this happened to me, and then it's boom. And so you want to be able to show, well, what do you do to prevent this kind of thing? We also have investors, or for big publicly traded companies, you can have activist shareholder groups bringing proposals. So it's coming from all angles. And yeah, the expectations, you're right, are really high, and it's hard to get it. You want to get it right too. So I think you and I have talked about taking action, and it all started with, yeah, we're, the black square on the Instagram, and now that's not enough. We're seeing 3 years later, what have you actually done? How is it integrated? How are your leaders? What do you expect of them? I know you are the leadership guru, so
Thank you. Well, it's kind of funny because you're bringing together a conversation that I love to have about accountability, right? And so, for great accountability to happen, you have to have agreed upon expectations. And right now, particularly, and I'll say over the last several years, you've had these increase in expectations from your outside stakeholders, customers, employees, internally you've had a lot of high expectations for an organization to perform at, and I'm going to say values for lack of a better word, at a really high level, where they are engaging and being inclusive and seeing these things happen. And change is hard, especially at some different levels. So you have this expectation that some organizations have really fed into, and some of them have kind of taken them at face value. But where you see that second piece of it is that accountability, is you hold them accountable to meeting those standards. And that's where I think sometimes it flip-flops a little bit, right? We have these stakeholders that are willing to speak up and say, hey, we expected more change, or hey, you don't have a woman at the senior leadership table, or you don't have someone of color that's in this organization, or these people aren't being represented, or these people aren't being heard or included in discussions or conversations. And this is where that accountability piece starts to, I'm going to say, for the lawyer speak, almost risk management. Because at some point, it's not a matter of if you're going to be held accountable, it's a matter of when you're going to be held accountable.
true. True, I agree. And I think, yeah, maybe we could look at the first tiers. Do you have a key player in your business who's done something really bad? We've seen quite a lot of that. If you don't have that, great. Next, do you have numbers and data and certain people in the right places? That's another angle. And then are you a leader when and if you have those people? Do you have leaders who elevate your values, and sort of send them out in everything they do, whether it's performance reviews or sales calls. So that's, I think, when you're able to really make progress, is that idea of it. I don't want to infiltrate, sounds like a negative word, but I mean infiltrate in a positive way, into the values of the business.
So tell me, what role does training play into that? Because I love that you kind of almost created this little hierarchy of like bare bones, don't do stupid things, which I know sounds easier said than done, but people do stupid things all the time. Second layer of that is making sure that you're having the right structure to support kind of the expectations around that. And then we've got this leading by example and kind of really shifting a cultural aspect of it. And I know you really play in the training world. So how does training feed into that?
So training, just I guess I'll tell you how I got into it. Was I've always been a litigator, and I actually still believe in litigation as a way to make change, because unless someone's feet are held to the fire, or business, they may or may not care about something. And so I do believe in certain cases that litigation is a good way to make change, to make, say, a company who's really stubborn, say, actually, this is a problem here, and we need to stamp this out in our place. Um, and
Give them
then,
enough pain, kind of give
yeah,
them enough pain to
yeah,
hold their feet to the fire so it's worth changing. They're motivated
yes.
for it.
As I said, I'm a litigator. I didn't really, I kind of thought as training is a nice to have, but I now, not only, my views on that have changed because, you know, the world has changed, and business, uh, the fact that this is business news now. So training is important for a few reasons. I got into this because the laws started to change, and I'm from Canada, and in many states where we have customers across North America, but made it mandatory. So New York, California, Connecticut, Illinois, you have to have training in sexual harassment, and that is, to protect people and have that the risk of it happening reduced. We hope, when people can, like you say, be on that same page and in agreement about values at its basic stuff, to how people should be treated and what their rights are. So I thought, okay, well, I had clients asking me, I was speaking at conferences about new laws, and people said, do you know any good online programs? And, or, e-learning was hardly, I didn't even really know what that was. And then I looked around, there's a lot of, I mean, better to have something than nothing generally, although some are not great. And I thought, well, if being a talking head is, I'm not bad, as you can see, but it's not that fun to listen to a talking head or have a lot of text. And so my dream was, how can we have training that's actually for reluctant learners, people who are not even reluctant, just most people are reluctant learners when it comes to mandatory training. So we use animation, we use voice actors, we use some gamification, to make it something people, like, this sounds like a low bar, but people don't dread doing. So training is important. So that's, where we went with Ryley Learning. Training is important for that compliance piece. Like I said, in many states, it's mandatory. But I would say most people come to us for the culture piece. So not just, hey, we need to do this. Do you have this product? It's like, you know what? These are our values. We want people to know them when they onboard, when they're here. Maybe they've been here 20 years. We want to reinforce. So that piece, even, I shouldn't say even, but we didn't always think like this, I would say, pre-COVID, but well-being and mental health in the workplace it's all tied into, do you feel seen and respected and cared about? And if people don't, or if they have a really negative experience, like harassment, then they may, they're high absenteeism, or off sick. So there's the compliance, the legal, and the culture piece. So many reasons, like you say, that mix of risk management and creating a positive culture and a productive team.
I love that training tends to be that piece that everyone can have a piece of, where it's kind of the common ground, I'd like to call it, or at least the common language or the common experience. So whether it is that first level of doing stupid things, it's like, hey, you had training on how to not do stupid things, how to not get into this kind of trouble. And whether it's a conversation they're having internally or externally or something they're remembering, but it's really affecting the culture as a whole. And when everyone's going through a training or a similar experience or having something that connects and engage them, it does change that perspective. It opens up those new doors and it lets people know that they're really invested in this, that it gives that signal to even the employees that this is something that is part of our culture. This is something that we care about. This is something that we're prioritizing. And it has that kind of, just like a lot of times leadership is going to really start at the top and trickle down. It is very hard, very, very hard to be a lower level employee and speak up about some of these issues when you have really rough leadership. And if you have DE&I at the top that's not being addressed, not being concerned, not being talked about, not being valued as part of that strategic plan, it's really unfortunately going to be someone from one of the other levels that's going to speak up in a much much more vocal and difficult way than a quiet quitting or leaving an organization. They do have that, to your point, that litigation can really change perspective pretty quickly. And especially they're feeling the effects of it across the board, whether it is with that litigation or whether it is with employee turnover issues.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's
and morale. Yeah, it goes to morale too. And people go, oh, why did Diane leave? Oh, yeah. And it's not a great feeling. Oh, I have the same manager as Diane. This doesn't bode well for me. And yeah, I like that your term signal. I think that's important. And yeah, I think also having, so we had a whole an expert panel who worked on our course. So a lot of different lawyers, academics, teachers, educators, people with lived and professional experience looking at helping design the script, having say about how the characters looked. We get really good feedback on it being relatable and realistic, and also that it doesn't presume that the learner is white or of a certain privileged group, because it's inclusive in that way that this idea of equality affects everyone. And also it's not a us and them. That's not how this works. It's and to not make it feel like this is for a certain targeted group of people, or to kind of isolate or make people of color, women, LGBTQ, and anyone feel like we're talking about that you're not the learner, because that's kind of an important, when you say signaling, that's an important theme and signal as well.
I love the way I can tell there's all the ways that DE&I can go wrong, and the DE&I training can go very, very wrong quickly with the wrong message, the good intentions, but very poorly executed. So just want to wrap up here a little bit. What are some good key messages or takeaway that you want our listeners and watchers to walk away with the perspective of DE&I?
There's so many angles now, and I'm training is a little more my beat, as well as the legal and so for the legal part, it's like, do you have policies? Do you have training? Do people know what their rights are, how they should complain? I mean, I wouldn't even begin to, then you've got event planning, and you do want to celebrate the Pride Month or the different holidays. You've got hiring is huge. I'm not an expert on that, but so in terms of the training part, I'll speak to that. You make sure you have buy-in from leadership. And I guess the other point is, you don't know who are the leaders for this or anything. I know that some of our customers, the DEI leaders may not be the CEO or the president. They're those that actually have decision-making power who may run resource groups, or take the lead for certain things because it's important to them and they're passionate about it. So look for leaders in all places. Make sure you can at least tick those boxes, but you want to do better than that. Make sure you have training that people aren't complaining about, that is engaging, that's not a snooze, that all of us have clipped our nails during online training, but try to find a good quality product and make it part of onboarding. So you use the word signal, you're setting the tone. And then ask people, if you're not sure how people feel about anything. Again, I was never asked that when I was starting to work. You were lucky you just put your head down and we're lucky to have a job. But ask people, what do you think's missing here? What did you think of the training? Like, hey, even just the simple Netflix, like thumbs up or thumbs down, and ask people because they know the answer. And like we started with, go back to your stakeholders, who is not a very friendly way of saying people, but seek out and you will hear from those that are in the know.
I love that. That's a lot of takeaways and that's a lot of work to do around it. But as I think a lot of things come down to, is listening is so key with that, and listening to many different aspects and perspectives, and listening may even be part of the problem.
True.
So fortunately, it is always part of the solution. Bay, thank you so much for your incredible insights, your incredible expertise. Knowing that legal perspective is there and being able to really fuse that with some of these cultural conversations is so powerful and unique. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, madam.
We'll talk again soon. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Culture Conversations. I'm your host, Megan Robinson, founder of eLeader Experience, a professional leadership development company. Today, we shared actionable ideas to navigate the evolving workplace landscape, compete for talent, and build cultures that maximize potential. If you're looking to learn more about how to support your organization's leaders, you can learn more about our work at eleaderexperience.com. Now get out there and contribute positively to your organization's culture with your own conversations.